Sometimes, we spend our whole lives trying to be happy, trying to fix ourselves, trying to make everything perfect. And yet, the harder we try, the emptier we feel. It's like chasing the horizon. The more we run toward it, the further it moves away. That's the quiet truth behind The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck by Mark Manson. A book that doesn't tell you to be positive or believe in yourself, but instead tells you that maybe, just maybe, it's okay to not be okay all the time. It's a book that invites you to stop caring about everything and start caring about what really matters. Mark Manson isn't your typical self-help writer. He doesn't promise endless happiness or success. Instead, he speaks to you like a brutally honest friend who's been through the same mess you have. Someone who's failed, been lost, and realized that the secret to life isn't about trying to have no problems, but choosing better ones to care about. His message is simple. You only have so many fucks to give, so don't waste them on things that don't truly matter. In the beginning, Manson paints a picture of our world, a world that constantly tells us we should be extraordinary. We scroll through perfect lives on social media, filled with people traveling the world, buying new cars, getting promotions, and smiling endlessly. Everywhere we look, we're told that we should be achieving more, having more, being more. And when we don't, we feel like failures. But Manson flips this idea upside down. He says the desire for a better life is what makes us miserable in the first place. The more you desperately chase positive experiences, the more you remind yourself of what you lack. Wanting to be rich only reminds you that you're poor. Trying to be happy only reminds you that you're not. The pursuit of happiness, he says, often reinforces our unhappiness. He calls this the feedback loop from hell. It's when you feel bad about feeling bad, or anxious about being anxious, or guilty for not feeling grateful enough. You spiral deeper and deeper, trying to fix something that doesn't need fixing. The truth, Manson says, is that life itself is not meant to be permanently happy. It's meant to be real, filled with ups and downs, wins and losses, joy and pain. And that's where the subtle art of not giving a fuck comes in. It's not about being careless or cold. It's about learning how to focus your care wisely. You can't care about everything. Your energy, your time, your emotions are limited. So if you waste them on every minor inconvenience, every criticism, every little thing that doesn't go your way, you'll burn out. But if you choose what to care about and let go of the rest, life starts to feel lighter. He shares his own story about how he used to care too much. He cared about being liked, about success, about trying to impress everyone. He says, "When I was younger, I gave a fuck about everything. I gave a fuck about politics, about what people thought of me, about whether I was cool or not." But eventually he realized that all this caring was exhausting. He was giving his attention to things that didn't add any real value to his life. One of Manson's main points is that life's values determine what we care about. If your values are shallow, like wanting to be popular, rich, or always right, then your happiness will always depend on things outside your control. But if your values are deep, like honesty, responsibility, compassion, then you build a more grounded life. You stop chasing endless approval and start finding peace within yourself. He says something powerful. You can't be an important and life-changing presence for some people without also being a joke and an embarrassment to others. In other words, if you try to please everyone, you'll end up pleasing no one, least of all yourself. Not giving a fuck means being okay with not being liked by everyone. It means being okay with people misunderstanding you, disagreeing with you, even walking away. It's a kind of freedom that only comes when you stop constantly trying to prove yourself, because deep down that need to prove is what traps us. We live reacting to the world instead of living by our own truth. Manson uses a funny but honest story about Charles Bukowski, a writer who was drunk, rude, and self-destructive. Yet despite being a mess, Bukowski wrote books that touched millions of people. His tombstone reads, "Don't try. That doesn't mean you should give up. It means that you should stop trying to be something you're not. Stop pretending to be perfect. Stop faking positivity. Just be real." The world teaches us to always want more success, more followers, more experiences, but Manson says that's the problem. The constant chase is what makes us unhappy. Life's true satisfaction doesn't come from what we gain, but from what we're willing to let go of. He says, the key to a good life is not giving a fuck about more things, but about fewer things, only what is true and immediate and important. This idea feels uncomfortable at first. We've been told since childhood that we should dream big, chase happiness and never settle. But the more we chase, the more we run away from what's real. Because happiness isn't something you find. It's something you realize when you stop chasing it. Manson challenges us to stop seeing pain as something wrong. Pain, he says, is a part of life, not a flaw in it. Trying to eliminate pain only makes it worse. Instead, we should learn from it, grow from it, and let it shape our strength. He gives a simple example. When you work out at the gym, your muscles hurt. That pain is not a sign of weakness. It's a sign of growth. The same applies to emotional pain. When we struggle, when we fail, when we feel uncomfortable, that's life's way of teaching us resilience. He also talks about the difference between entitlement and responsibility. Many people today, he says, feel entitled. They think they deserve happiness, success, or love just for existing. But life doesn't work that way. True happiness comes from taking responsibility for your problems, not avoiding them. He says you can't control what happens to you, but you can always control how you respond to it. That simple truth is what separates people who grow from people who stay stuck. When you take responsibility, you regain power. You stop blaming the world and start shaping your own experience. Imagine this. Two people face the same problem. They lose their job. One blames their boss, the economy, and bad luck. The other accepts it as a challenge, learns new skills, and uses the setback to grow. Same problem, different values, different life. That's what Manson means by choosing better problems. Life will always have problems, but the quality of your life depends on the quality of the problems you're willing to solve. He reminds us that avoiding pain doesn't make us happy. It makes us fragile. True happiness comes from solving meaningful problems, not running from them. It's about facing reality with honesty and courage, even when it's uncomfortable. There's a quiet beauty in that truth, because once you stop fearing life's difficulties, you begin to see them as part of the story that makes you human. You realize that growth and peace are not found in comfort, but in the moments that challenge you. Manson's words are not gentle in tone, but they carry deep compassion. He's not trying to sell you a dream. He's trying to wake you up from one. He says, not giving a fuck does not mean being indifferent. It means being comfortable with being different. That line captures the heart of the book. You don't have to care about what the world tells you to care about. You don't have to compare your life to anyone else's. You don't have to pretend that everything is fine when it isn't. You just have to be honest. With yourself, with your limits, with your values. Once you do that, something changes inside. The noise quiets down. The endless chase slows. And you begin to notice the small, real moments that make life worth living. A good conversation, a quiet walk, the peace of doing something meaningful even when nobody notices. Because in the end, that's what this book is really about. Learning to care less about everything that doesn't matter, so you can finally care deeply about the few things that do. And it all starts by accepting this truth. You can't have a life without problems, but you can choose which problems are worth your care, your energy, your heart. When you make that choice, you stop being a victim of life and start being a participant in it. It's not easy. It takes courage to stop pretending, to stop performing, to stop giving your attention to what doesn't deserve it. But slowly, as you practice this art of not giving a fuck, you find a new kind of peace, one that doesn't come from control, but from letting go. You begin to see that the world doesn't need you to be perfect. It just needs you to be real. When we stop trying to control everything, something interesting happens. Life becomes quieter. We begin to see that most of our pain doesn't come from what happens to us, but from how much we resist it. We spend so much time trying to avoid discomfort that we forget how to live. But Mark Manson reminds us that the real measure of your character isn't how you feel when life is easy. It's how you respond when it's not. He tells us about how our values shape our happiness, and why most people suffer not because life is cruel, but because their values are broken. He explains that our values decide what we consider good or bad, what we care about and what we ignore. If our values are weak or external, like wanting to look attractive, be admired, or always be right, then we build our happiness on shaky ground. But if our values are solid, like honesty, curiosity, kindness, and growth, then even pain becomes meaningful. For example, imagine someone who bases their value on being liked. Every little criticism feels like a stab in the heart. A single negative comment online can ruin their whole day. But someone whose value is honesty will handle the same comment differently. They'll listen, think, and if it's fair, they'll learn from it. They won't fall apart because their sense of worth doesn't depend on approval. It depends on truth. That's one of Manson's biggest lessons. Stop measuring yourself with the wrong metrics. If your measure of success is how popular you are, you'll always lose, because someone will always be more loved, more followed, more admired. But if your measure of success is how real you are, how true you stay to your values, then you can't lose, because that's something no one can take away from you. He writes about how pain is unavoidable, but suffering is optional. You can't live without pain. It's built into existence, but how you interpret it decides what it becomes. Pain can be a teacher or a destroyer, depending on your attitude. When you choose good values, pain becomes a guide. When you choose bad ones, it becomes a prison. Manson gives an example of himself in his 20s, chasing shallow things, living for the next thrill, the next party, the next approval. He thought happiness came from constant excitement, but eventually it all felt empty. The highs never lasted. That's when he realized that a meaningful life doesn't come from chasing pleasure, but from choosing struggle for something worthwhile. He says, happiness comes from solving problems. The word solving is important. It means you have to face problems, not run from them. You have to accept them as part of life and deal with them with patience and honesty. Problems give life meaning. When you remove all struggle, life loses direction. It becomes flat, dull, and lifeless. It's ironic, and the more we try to avoid problems, the more miserable we become. Because in avoiding them, we avoid the very process that makes us grow. Manson explains that when people say they want a stress-free life, what they really want is a life without growth. And that's not living, that's just existing. He writes, the desire for a more positive experience is itself a negative experience. And paradoxically, the acceptance of one's negative experience is itself a positive experience. This is one of the most powerful lines in the book. It means that when you stop fighting pain, it starts to hurt less. When you stop demanding that life must always feel good, it starts to feel peaceful. We live in a culture that glorifies comfort. We want everything fast, easy, and guaranteed. But real change, real peace doesn't come from comfort. It comes from the moments when life tests us, when we fail, when we're rejected, when we lose something we love. Those are the moments that show us who we are. Manson encourages us to stop chasing positivity and instead focus on reality, to look our fears in the eye, to be okay with not knowing, to accept that we're not special. Yes, he says it bluntly, you are not special. And at first that sounds harsh, but there's freedom in that truth. Because when you stop believing you're special, you stop feeling entitled to special treatment. You stop expecting life to always go your way. You start living with humility. This "you are not special" idea is one of the hardest for people to accept. We've been raised on the belief that we're all unique, destined for greatness. And while that sounds uplifting, it quietly creates pressure. We start to feel like failures if we're not extraordinary. But Manson argues that real greatness comes not from trying to stand out, but from learning to be okay with being ordinary, and doing ordinary things with care and honesty. Think about it. Most of the peace we feel in life comes from simple, ordinary moments. Cooking a meal, laughing with someone you love, watching the sunset, finishing a small task that matters only to you. None of it is glamorous, but it's real. And that's where life actually happens. Not in the grand achievements, but in the quiet presence of everyday moments. He uses the example of the self-esteem movement, the modern idea that telling everyone they're special and amazing will make them confident. But instead, it made people fragile. When you believe you're exceptional, any failure feels unbearable. Every mistake feels like an attack on your identity. But when you accept that you're not special, you free yourself. You can fail, learn, and try again, without shame. Manson's message isn't to stop caring about life, but to stop caring about meaningless things. Because caring about everything makes you anxious, but caring about the right things makes you strong. When you choose your struggles wisely, you start to respect life more. He also reminds us that saying no is powerful. Every time you say yes to something, you're saying no to something else, your time, your peace, your values. So if you say yes to everything just to please others, you'll slowly lose yourself. Not giving a fuck doesn't mean ignoring everyone. It means setting boundaries, choosing when to give your attention and when to walk away. For instance, when someone insults you, you have two options. You can give a fuck, argue, and let it ruin your day. Or you can not give a fuck, understand that their words come from their own pain and move on. One reaction steals your peace, the other protects it. That's what emotional maturity looks like, choosing peace over drama. He shares how he once got caught in meaningless online arguments. He would waste hours trying to win debates that didn't matter. Then he realized he was giving too many fucks to things that didn't improve his life. So he stopped. Not because he didn't care about truth, but because he cared more about using his energy on something that actually mattered. That's the shift Manson wants for us. To move from reacting to everything, to choosing consciously what's worth our energy. When we do that, life becomes simpler. Problems don't disappear, but we start seeing them clearly. We start choosing better battles. Another thing he touches on is the illusion of control. Most people believe they can control how life unfolds, but control is an illusion. We can't control others. We can't control the future. The only thing we can truly control is our own response. Once we accept that, life stops feeling like a constant fight. Manson says, you will never be happy if you continue to search for what happiness consists of. You will never live if you are looking for the meaning of life. It sounds philosophical, but it's deeply practical. Stop trying to force happiness. Just live, honestly, imperfectly, consciously. Happiness is what follows when you stop chasing it. He reminds us that growth doesn't come from winning, but from failing, from being wrong, from being uncertain, from falling and learning to stand up again. We think we want certainty, but certainty makes us rigid. Uncertainty keeps us curious. It keeps us alive. Think of a child learning to walk. They fall again and again, yet they never feel ashamed of it. They simply get up and try once more. That's how we should live. Not avoiding mistakes, but embracing them as teachers. The moment you accept that you'll never have everything figured out, you start living with more peace. Because now, instead of demanding that life be perfect, you learn to dance with its imperfections. You begin to care less about being right and more about understanding. Less about being admired and more about being real. And that's what not giving a fuck truly means. Not apathy, but balance. Not detachment, but focus. It's the art of giving your care to what's truly worthy of your heart and releasing everything that isn't. When you start practicing it, you'll notice small changes. The things that used to upset you won't matter as much. The opinions that once hurt you will fade into background noise. And slowly you'll realize that peace doesn't come from fixing life. It comes from accepting it, fully and without fear. Because the truth is, you don't need to be perfect to be happy. You just need to be honest about what you care about, and brave enough to let go of the rest. There comes a point in every person's life when they realize that no matter how much they plan, no matter how much they hope, things rarely turn out exactly the way they imagine. That realization can feel painful or freeing. For Mark Manson, it became the foundation of a more peaceful way of living. He realized that the more we fight against uncertainty, the more anxious and fearful we become. But when we accept that uncertainty is part of life, we stop trying to control everything and start learning from it. He says that uncertainty is the root of all growth. When we accept that we don't know everything, we open the door to curiosity and wisdom. It's our willingness to be wrong that allows us to become right, our willingness to fail that allows us to grow stronger. But if we always need to be certain, if we always need to feel correct, then we close ourselves off from learning. We start living inside a cage built from our own pride. Manson tells a story about how for years he thought he had everything figured out. He was convinced he understood what happiness meant, what love meant, what success looked like. But over time, life humbled him. Failures, heartbreaks, and mistakes taught him that his understanding was limited. The more he learned, the more he realized how little he actually knew. And that realization didn't make him weaker. It made him freer. He calls this the value of uncertainty, because when you don't cling so tightly to being right, you become open to new experiences. You start to listen more and judge less. You stop seeing life as a battle to win and start seeing it as a mystery to explore. He even says that we should doubt our own beliefs regularly. Not to live in confusion, but to keep ourselves honest. If you think you're right all the time, he writes, you'll never see what you could become. Growth requires humility, the courage to admit that you might be wrong today so you can be wiser tomorrow. This attitude of humility changes everything. How we handle problems, how we deal with people, even how we see ourselves. Because the moment you stop needing to be perfect, you start accepting yourself as you are. That's where real peace begins. Manson reminds us that humans naturally avoid uncertainty because it feels uncomfortable. Our brains want safety. We want to believe we know what's coming next. But that need for control is what creates anxiety. When we try to make everything predictable, we set ourselves up for disappointment because life doesn't follow our plans. He encourages readers to practice what he calls being wrong gracefully. Instead of defending your opinions like a wall, allow them to evolve. If you learn something new, let it change you. Don't cling to the past version of yourself just because it feels familiar. Growth means letting old versions of you die so new ones can live. He gives an example from his own life, how he used to see success as freedom from responsibility. He wanted to travel, to be his own boss, to avoid the grind. But later he realized that true freedom isn't avoiding responsibility. It's choosing it. The people who live with purpose are those who choose their responsibilities consciously. This is another big theme in the book: responsibility. Manson says that taking responsibility for your life, for your choices, your feelings, your reactions, is the most empowering thing you can do. It's not about blaming yourself for everything, but about understanding that even if something isn't your fault, it's still your responsibility to respond to it wisely. He writes, we are responsible for everything in our lives, no matter the external circumstances. At first that sounds harsh, but what he means is simple. When you take responsibility, you reclaim power. You stop being a victim. You stop waiting for others to fix you. You stop believing that life owes you something. And in that moment, you become free. Imagine two people facing the same situation, a breakup. One spends months blaming their ex, calling them cruel, feeling powerless. The other feels the pain but uses it to reflect. What can I learn? What part did I play? What can I do differently next time? The situation is the same, but the second person grows while the first stays stuck. That's the difference responsibility makes. He also discusses the danger of blame. We love to blame others. It's easier than facing ourselves. We blame our parents, society, luck, or timing. But blame gives away our control. The moment we point fingers, we lose the power to change our own story. Taking responsibility doesn't mean saying everything is your fault. It means accepting that your response is your choice. He shares an emotional story about a friend who lost everything: his business, his marriage, his savings. For a long time, his friend drowned in self-pity, but then one day he decided to stop blaming fate. He started small, fixing what he could, learning new skills, apologizing where he needed to. Slowly, his life began to rebuild piece by piece. That's the magic of responsibility. It doesn't promise quick fixes. It gives you back your direction. Manson calls this the responsibility fault fallacy. He says that just because something isn't your fault doesn't mean it's not your responsibility. For example, if someone crashes into your car, it's not your fault, but fixing it is your responsibility. Life works the same way. Unfair things happen all the time, but we always have the power to choose our response. That's what separates emotionally strong people from the rest. They don't waste energy wishing the world were different. They accept it as it is, unfair, unpredictable, beautiful, and painful all at once, and they work within it with courage. He says that avoiding responsibility may bring short-term relief, but it always leads to long-term pain, because when you refuse to own your choices, you also refuse to own your power. The more you run from responsibility, the weaker you feel. The more you embrace it, the stronger and calmer you become. And this connects beautifully with the next idea, that we are all constantly choosing what we give meaning to. Life doesn't come pre-packaged with purpose. We create meaning through our choices. When you take responsibility for what you value, you begin to design your own peace. For Manson, this realization came after years of chasing external success, the money, the freedom, the validation. He thought those things would make him happy, but they didn't. It was only when he started focusing on what truly mattered: love, honesty, growth, that life began to feel meaningful. He tells a story about visiting a man in a remote country who lived in a small house with barely anything. Yet that man smiled constantly, welcomed guests warmly, and seemed genuinely fulfilled. Manson realized that happiness wasn't about possessions or achievements, it was about perspective. The poor man's happiness came from gratitude, connection, and purpose. We often think that success leads to happiness, but Manson says it's the other way around. Happiness leads to success. When we focus on what's meaningful, success naturally follows in its own quiet way. He challenges readers to think about what they truly want. Not what society says they should want. Not what looks impressive on paper. But what actually gives their life meaning. Because most people chase goals that aren't theirs. They chase what looks good, not what feels right. When you start asking yourself what you're willing to struggle for, you find your real values. Because everyone wants a happy life, but not everyone is willing to go through the pain that happiness requires. Everyone wants success, but not everyone is willing to face failure again and again. He says what determines your success isn't what do you want to enjoy, but what pain are you willing to endure. That's one of the deepest truths in the book. You can tell what someone truly values by looking at what they're willing to suffer for. A musician who practices for hours, a writer who rewrites endlessly, a parent who sacrifices sleep, they all find meaning not in avoiding pain, but in choosing pain that matters. That's the subtle art Manson keeps talking about. The art of choosing your struggles. When you choose your struggles wisely, you choose your life wisely. Because life will always bring discomfort, you might as well pick the kind that leads somewhere meaningful. He reminds us that this is not a one-time decision. It's a daily practice. Every morning we choose where to put our attention, what to care about, and what to let go of. Every small choice builds the story of who we are. And as you grow more mindful of those choices, life starts to feel different. You realize you don't have to react to everything. You don't have to fix everyone. You don't have to prove yourself to anyone. You just have to live with intention, to give your care only to what truly deserves it. That's the beginning of real peace. Not a loud, dramatic kind of peace, but a quiet, steady one, the kind that sits deep inside you, unshaken by the noise of the world. Because when you stop trying to control everything, when you stop blaming and start taking responsibility, when you stop chasing happiness and start living with honesty, that's when you truly begin to live. There's a strange thing about life. The more you run from pain, the more it seems to follow you. But when you stop running, when you face it and learn from it, the pain starts to lose its power. Mark Manson spends much of his book reminding us of this quiet truth. Pain is not the enemy. Pain is the path. He says that we live in a world obsessed with pleasure, a culture that sells the idea that happiness comes from comfort, luxury, or ease. Everywhere we turn, someone is trying to convince us that if we just buy one more thing, achieve one more goal, or fix one more flaw, we'll finally feel okay. But the truth, he says, is the opposite. Comfort doesn't lead to happiness. It leads to numbness. It makes us soft. It makes us avoid the very struggles that could make us stronger. Pain is not something to escape. It's something to learn from. It's the universe's way of pointing out what matters most. The question isn't how to avoid pain, but how to choose the right kind of pain, the kind that helps you grow instead of the kind that keeps you stuck. He shares a story about a friend who spent years in a job he hated. Every morning the man would complain. Every evening he'd dream of quitting. But he never did. Why? Because staying miserable was easier than facing the discomfort of change. He was choosing a familiar pain over a meaningful one. Manson says that's what most of us do. We tolerate the pain we know, toxic relationships, unfulfilling work, bad habits, because we fear the pain we don't know. But real change demands discomfort. It demands that we step into uncertainty. You can't transform your life without walking through fear, failure, and vulnerability. And that's where most people give up. Not because they can't change, but because they're not willing to be uncomfortable long enough to grow. Manson writes, "Everything worthwhile in life is won through surmounting the associated negative experience. The joy of love comes from the risk of heartbreak. The satisfaction of success comes from the struggle of effort. The beauty of self-respect comes from the courage to face your flaws. There's no victory without effort, no peace without pain. That's why he calls happiness a problem, not because it's bad, but because it's misunderstood. People think happiness is a permanent state, but happiness is not a destination. It's a side effect. It's what appears when you're doing something meaningful, when you're engaged in struggles that matter to you. You can't chase happiness directly. It's like trying to grab smoke. The harder you reach, the further it slips away. Instead of asking, what will make me happy? Manson suggests asking, what am I willing to suffer for? Because that question leads you to truth. Every dream, every goal, every meaningful relationship comes with pain attached. If you can accept the pain that comes with it, you can have the life you want. He gives an example about love. We all want a perfect relationship, one without arguments or frustrations. But love isn't built by avoiding conflict. It's built by how we handle it. The strongest couples aren't the ones who never fight. They're the ones who learn how to fight fairly, to listen, to forgive, and to grow together. That's love grounded in reality, not fantasy. He also talks about failure, how society treats it like a disease. We fear failure so much that we often don't even try. But failure is simply feedback. It's life's way of teaching us. Every mistake reveals something. A weakness to strengthen, a lesson to learn, a path to adjust. Without failure, we remain blind to our potential. Manson says, we can be truly successful only at something we're willing to fail at. That sentence carries a quiet wisdom. It means that the road to success is built entirely on failure. Every person you admire, every artist, athlete, entrepreneur, or parent, has failed more times than they've succeeded, but they kept going. Because they didn't see failure as the end, they saw it as part of the process. He tells a personal story about starting his first blog. For months, nobody read it. No one cared. His friends mocked him. But he kept writing, not because he knew he'd succeed, but because he enjoyed the process. He found meaning in the struggle itself. Years later, that same blog became his career. The lesson: you can't wait for success to give you permission to care. You have to care first, even when nobody notices, even when it hurts. That's the essence of resilience, doing the work for the sake of the work, not for the applause. Manson also dives into a deeper theme, the problem with certainty. We all crave it. We want to know what's coming next, to be sure of our choices, to never doubt ourselves. But certainty is an illusion. The world is too complex, too unpredictable. When we cling to certainty, we stop learning. When we accept uncertainty, we grow wiser. He says that the greatest truths in life are often uncomfortable and uncertain. Nobody really knows what they're doing. Everyone is figuring things out as they go. The people who seem confident aren't fearless. They've just learned to act even while feeling uncertain. That's courage. He calls uncertainty the root of all progress. When you allow yourself to be unsure, you stay curious. You ask better questions. You listen more. You explore new paths. And eventually that humility turns into wisdom. It's like walking through fog. You can only see a few steps ahead, but if you keep moving, the path unfolds. That's how life works. You can't wait for the fog to clear before you move. You have to move first. He encourages readers to practice something he calls the do something principle. When you feel stuck, don't overthink. Don't wait for motivation or the perfect plan. Just do something at anything. Action creates momentum. Even small steps create clarity. He writes, action isn't just the effect of motivation, it's the cause of it. This flips the usual advice upside down. Most people think they need to feel inspired before they act. But Manson says it's the other way around. Act first and inspiration follows. When you take even a small step, your brain starts to focus. You feel progress. And progress, however small, builds motivation. He shares how this principle helped him overcome procrastination. Whenever he felt stuck, he stopped waiting for the right mood. Instead, he just started, writing one sentence, answering one email, doing one task. Those tiny actions often led to flow. The same idea applies to any area of life. Starting a business, healing from heartbreak, building confidence. You don't wait until you're ready. You become ready by doing. Manson also explores the idea of rejection, how saying no shapes our identity. Every time we reject something, we define what we stand for. People think saying yes to everything makes them open-minded, but it often just makes them directionless. Rejection isn't cruel. It's clarity. It's what creates boundaries and integrity. He says that life is defined by what we're willing to reject, If you want to build a meaningful career, you have to reject distractions. If you want a healthy relationship, you have to reject toxic behavior. If you want peace, you have to reject unnecessary drama. Every yes requires 1,000 no's. Rejection also means being rejected, and that's okay. When someone rejects you, it's not a verdict on your worth. It's simply a mismatch of values. Manson says that most people take rejection too personally because their sense of self is fragile. But when you have strong values, rejection doesn't destroy you. You see it for what it is, a natural part of life. He shares how, as a younger man, he feared rejection deeply. He avoided asking for help, avoided risk, avoided love. But that fear kept him small. When he started embracing rejection as part of the journey, he grew. He learned that rejection is proof that you're living honestly, that you're putting yourself out there, that you're trying. Manson's words here carry a quiet encouragement. You can't be an important and life-changing presence for some people without also being a joke and an embarrassment to others. That sentence sums up the courage of authenticity. When you live by your truth, you'll always face rejection, but you'll also find connection with the people who truly see you. As the book continues, Manson's message deepens. He begins to talk about death, not to depress the reader, but to awaken them. He says that death gives life meaning. When you remember that your time is limited, you start to care differently. You stop wasting energy on trivial things. You stop living for appearances. You begin to focus on what truly matters. He calls this the death of self-importance. It's when you realize that you're not the center of the universe, and that's a relief. Because once you let go of that illusion, you stop comparing, competing, and pretending. You start living with humility and gratitude. Manson explains that thinking about death isn't morbid. It's clarifying. It helps you see what really deserves your time. If you knew you had only a short while left, would you care about online opinions? Would you chase validation? Or would you focus on love, kindness, honesty, and peace? That's the subtle art. The art of not giving a fuck about the noise and instead giving everything you have to what truly matters before your time runs out. Because one day, it will. And that's what makes every moment sacred. In the final part of Mark Manson's message, everything circles back to one truth, that freedom doesn't come from having more. It comes from caring less about what doesn't matter, and more about what does. He reminds us that our lives are short, fragile, and unpredictable. Every day we get to wake up, breathe, and be alive. That's already a miracle. Yet most of us spend those precious days worrying about things that won't even matter a month from now. The way someone looked at us, the comment someone made, the number of likes on a photo, and all these tiny, meaningless details eat away at our peace. Manson invites us to step back and look at the bigger picture. We are temporary creatures, spinning on a small rock in an infinite universe. Someday everything we've built, every achievement, every possession will fade. The only thing that will matter is how we lived and loved, how we faced our struggles, and how we made others feel while we were here. This realization might sound dark at first, but it's not. It's liberating. Because when you realize that life is temporary, you stop wasting time on nonsense. You start caring deeply but selectively. You give your energy to what truly deserves it. Your purpose, your people, your peace. Manson tells a powerful story about a man named Hiro Onoda, a Japanese soldier from World War II who refused to believe the war was over. For almost 30 years, he hid in the jungles of the Philippines, surviving on wild fruit, avoiding locals, convinced that victory would come. Even after leaflets were dropped announcing the end of the war, he thought they were lies. It wasn't until 1974 that he finally surrendered, after his former commander was flown in to tell him the truth. For 3 decades, Onoda fought a war that no longer existed. And Manson says that's exactly what many of us do. We keep fighting old battles in our minds. We hold on to grudges, regrets, identities, and fears that no longer serve us. We refuse to see that the war is over, that we can put the sword down and move on. Letting go doesn't mean giving up. It means accepting reality. It means understanding that life changes, people change, and holding on to the past only steals the present. We can't build a peaceful life while clinging to old pain. Manson explains that this is what it really means to not give a fuck. It's not about apathy. It's not about walking around with a cold heart. It's about choosing your cares wisely. It's about caring more deeply for fewer things, the things that give your life purpose. When you stop caring about being perfect, you can finally grow. When you stop caring about being liked, you can finally be yourself. When you stop caring about avoiding pain, you can finally live with strength. That's the paradox. By caring less, you care better. He also explores the danger of entitlement. He says that much of modern misery comes from the belief that we deserve special treatment, that life should be easier for us, that we should be more successful, more loved, more admired than others. But entitlement disconnects us from reality. It makes us fragile. When you think you're special, every challenge feels like an insult. Every rejection feels like a tragedy. But when you accept that you're not special, that you're just another human doing your best in a chaotic world, you feel free. You stop expecting life to bend around your desires. You start appreciating it as it is. This humility opens the door to gratitude. You begin to see beauty in ordinary things. A morning walk, a friend's laughter, a moment of silence. You stop chasing extraordinary moments and start recognizing that ordinary life is already full of them. Manson writes that true happiness comes not from solving life's problems, but from having better problems to solve. And that's the shift he wants readers to make. To stop seeking a life without pain and start choosing a life worth the pain. He says, maturity is what happens when one learns to only give a fuck about what's truly fuck-worthy. It's blunt, but deeply wise. Maturity is realizing that you can't fix everything, and you don't need to. You just need to decide what's worth your effort and accept the rest with peace. That means accepting that you will fail sometimes, that people will misunderstand you, that not every dream will work out. But that's okay, because none of that defines your worth. What defines you is how honestly you live, how bravely you try, and how gracefully you let go. He reflects on his own life, the mistakes, the heartbreaks, the times he thought he was broken. But he says those painful moments became his teachers. They shaped his character more than comfort ever could. Pain taught him humility. Failure taught him strength. Loss taught him love. There's a moment in the book where he talks about standing in front of a mirror after years of trying to be someone he wasn't, trying to be cool, successful, admired. He realized he didn't even know who he truly was anymore. That moment of self-honesty was his turning point. He stopped pretending. He stopped chasing validation. And slowly, life began to feel lighter. He started giving his attention to what he could control, his choices, his behavior, his attitude. Everything else he let go. That's the real art. Not caring about everything, but caring only about what's real. Manson also talks about responsibility, a word that scares many people, but actually holds the key to power. He says we can't always control what happens to us, but we can always control how we respond. Taking responsibility isn't about blaming yourself. It's about reclaiming your strength. He gives an example. Imagine you're walking down the street and someone bumps into you. It's not your fault, but how you react is your choice. You can get angry and ruin your mood, or you can smile and move on. Either way, you are in charge of your peace. That's true in every area of life. We can't control other people. We can't control the weather or luck or timing, but we can control our reactions, our values, our focus. And that's where real freedom lives, not in external success, but in inner stability. Manson calls this the responsibility-fault fallacy. He says that fault and responsibility are not the same thing. Something might not be your fault, but it's still your responsibility to deal with it. If someone hurts you, it's not your fault, but it's still your responsibility to heal, because nobody else can do it for you. This perspective turns victims into creators. It turns suffering into growth. When you stop waiting for others to fix your pain and start taking responsibility for your healing, you gain control of your life again. He writes that this kind of strength doesn't look glamorous. It's quiet. It's a person choosing forgiveness over bitterness. It's someone getting up again after failure. It's a parent loving their child after a hard day. It's the everyday courage that doesn't make headlines, but builds character. As the book reaches its final pages, Manson returns to the theme of death, not as something to fear, but as something to live in awareness of. He says that most of us live as if we'll never die, postponing joy, waiting for the right time, saving our dreams for later. But there is no later, there is only now. He shares a story of visiting a friend's grave, someone who died young. Standing there, he felt a deep silence, not sadness but clarity. He realized that death strips away all the noise. It reminds us that our time is the most valuable thing we have. And so, he says, we should use that time wisely. We should love fully, forgive quickly, speak honestly, and live with intention. We should care less about being impressive and more about being kind. The subtle art of not giving a fuck is not about indifference, it's about focus. It's about building a life around values that matter and letting go of the rest. It's about facing reality with open eyes and an open heart, knowing that nothing lasts forever, and that's what makes it beautiful. He ends his message with humility. He doesn't pretend to have all the answers. He admits that life will always be messy and uncertain, but he says that if we can learn to choose our struggles wisely, to accept pain as part of love, and to live by our deepest values, then we've already won. Because life isn't about never giving a fuck. It's about giving your limited fucks to the things that truly deserve them, your family, your passions, your truth. And maybe, when it's all said and done, that's enough. When the noise fades and the lights dim, what will matter most won't be the opinions of others, or the trophies we collected, or the fears that held us back. What will matter is how deeply we lived, how honestly we loved, and how peacefully we learned to let go. So take a deep breath. You don't have to fix everything. You don't have to be everything. You just have to be real and give your heart to what matters while you still can. That's the subtle art. That's the freedom. That's life, as Mark Manson sees it. And as we all eventually come to understand.